Good evening, everybody. We are in Parsha Tetzaveh. That would be chapter 27, verse 20. And we're going to discuss just two verses, seemingly, that seem way out of place. Because most of Parsha Tetzaveh is going to be dealing with the Kohanim and their vestments. That goes on for pages about the clothing that they wear. And towards the end, we will talk about the inauguration of the Kohanim and the vestments as well. And then toward the very, very, very end, we're talking about the Tamid offering, which is also very interesting, but we're not going to discuss that tonight. And it ends with the incense altar, which is not necessarily dealing with the vestments. But the Clear Card lists, according to my count, 11 questions. And anybody who wants to really learn some basic Hebrew, you should follow along in the Hebrew with us. It's a great way to learn. I'm not telling you that I'm an expert in Hebrew, but he dishes it out. He's an expert in Hebrew, okay? So I counted 11 questions, and we'll start with the first. He mentions, look right away in verse 20, V'ata Tetzaveh. Most Opan teachers, especially Americans, we get into this habit, this nasty habit, of using the word you multiple times, meaning V'ata, which is and you, Tetzaveh. The word, the letter taf in the word Tetzaveh is implied you shall command. So there's two pronouns. There's two second person pronouns being used in the first two words. So the Ata Tetzaveh B'nai Yisrael. Okay, so I said we're in Parshat Tetzaveh. That's chapter 27, verse 20. The only way it's translated in most books is now you shall command the children of Israel. I actually think the word now is actually very bad translation. What's your problem? What?
It's not now.
No, not at all. In fact, Rashi says L'doros. Right, we're going to get to that. But that's just, I'm letting you know that the whole idea of translating this now is very problematic. So all you have is, and you, let's even put a comma there, you shall command the children of Israel. That's how it would be properly translated. So he says, Yesh lidakdek. If you're very careful and you examine it, what in the world is the Ata Tetzaveh with shtei nochachiot, with two second person pronouns? Actually, the Ata Tzaveh and you command is more proper. Miboyle memar. It really was required to have said if you know anything about grammar. And again, we know that Hashem wrote the Torah, and He's the master of grammar. There's nobody better grammarian, that's a word, than Him, than He, than the Almighty who created the entire universe and created the language Himself. And the second question, also the word V'ata is completely superfluous. Kula miyuteris. It's not necessary. Why is it not necessary? Because there is a verse in Vayikra is Leviticus, chapter 24, verse 2, where, and believe it or not, this is talking about what? The menorah. Now these two verses I mentioned in the beginning seem out of place because it's dealing with the menorah. And right there, when the menorah is discussed, it says specifically, command the children of Israel. It doesn't even use the word you once, and certainly doesn't use the word you twice like it uses in our verse, our chapter. So that should be like alarm bells going off. Ki b'lashon zeh nemar b'parshas Emor, as I mentioned, al haneros halalu, regarding the candles. Now that's already going to be a little bit of a hint to something we're going to discuss, because in our Parsha, it mentions one candle, whereas in Parshas Emor, it mentions all 7 candles. So we'll have to get to that, but that's not addressed yet. But he does bring down what the Ramban says, and the Ramban says, Shehikpid shelo ya'aseh ze al yedei shliach. That it's very important that Aaron, the high priest, is the one who lights the menorah, and that's the command. You, the double U, not a W, not a letter W, but the fact that you is mentioned twice, it's like emphasizing you and only you should be lighting this menorah. So not to do this through another agent or agency or a messenger. But wait till you hear this. So now the third question is, if that's the case, this itself is a question. Why? Because we want to know, Lama hikpid b'mitzvah zu yoter mikol hamitzvos. Why? We have 613 commandments. Why is this the one that's pointed out, only you and nobody else, by the menorah? Come on. You have 612 other mitzvahs. It's only this one? So question number 3 is, why is it this particular mitzvah that has this idea or notion that you and only you? But based on what the Ramban said, then we're stuck with another question. Because a few verses later, in chapter 28, verse 3, it says, V'ata tidaber. And what did we just hear, and what did we just find out? As many Opan teachers will point out, especially to the Americans, you don't need to use the word you twice. And yet in that verse it also says, and you shall speak. This is regarding the production of the garments for the Kohanim. Again, a double you, a twice usage of the word you. Kish gam sham hadavar tzarich ishuv. This requires clarification. The 5th question that many Meforshim ask, Ma inyan mitzvah zu lakan? What is the idea of having the concept of this mitzvah here? In other words, where's the proper place for the mitzvah of the menorah? In Parshas Emor. That's where it goes into great length. Here you're talking about 2 verses. That's it, 2 verses. But over there, in chapter 24 of Leviticus, it goes much more into depth. As he says, Ki ikar makoma, that its prime location, its prime place, it's makoma acher, asiyat mishkan. It's after the production, the creation of the Mishkan, and the hanachas menorah. The place that we really should be discussing, the menorah, is after the Mishkan is done, and the time and place it should be put. And the Abarbanel, he says, explains, Ki ikar mitzvah zu b'Parshas Emor. So too, that the prime location of this Parsha, of dealing with the menorah, is not here at all. So we really wonder, what are these 2 verses doing here? It's way out of place. Way out of place. And therefore, when it says here, Tetzaveh, as Rashi pointed out, Rotzolomar, what does that mean? Ata atid l'tzavot et b'nei Yisrael. Now we're dumbfounded. What does that mean? You're saying it here because in the future you will command the Jewish people? You know, in Parshas Emor, after the Mishkan is built and the menorah needs to be placed, then and only then? But you're saying to me now, Tetzaveh, you shall command them as a future. It's like telling you that you will command them in the future. And according to his words, actually the whole verse is superfluous then. You don't need it here at all because of the famous question, Kol pasuk zem yutar. Why? What in the world would you need to tell them now that later on in the end you're going to command? So there must be something, it must be a fascinating reason why it's here. It just doesn't make sense. Again, what would the Abarbanel do with those words? We mentioned it's in verse 28, verse 3, where it says the Atatidaber, that's said very close to this. So in other words, we're producing more questions as we go along. And believe me, we're just beginning to scratch the surface, because there's 11 questions that I figured out here, and we're only halfway through. So the words here in our verse says lahalot ner tamid, to raise up, right, to light. Ner is singular, tamid, we'll discuss, also means continuously, forever, on a regular basis, but tamid is constantly or continuously. So why does it say ner? Neros mi boile. It should have used the plural, because how many? Everyone knows how many candles there are. Not on your Hanukkah for Hanukkah, that's 8. Here you had 7, 1 in the middle and 3 on each side. There were 7, Hare Shiva Hayu. Everyone knows there's 7. And then the 7th question, Halo lo dalku ki im me'erev v'at boker. The verse actually says it's going to be lit from when? In verse 21. Right? Look at verse 21. You shall arrange it from evening until morning. Now, what does it mean, arrange it from evening until morning? It's lit from evening until morning. Are you thinking that he's going to stand there arranging it the whole time? From the time the sun sets until 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning? I mean, come on. That's Aaron's job. He'll never be able to function the next day. So, what does it mean that... I'll just read the words again. Is it not known? Is it not that it's only lit from evening until morning? So why does it say tamid? Why does it say constantly, on a a continuous basis? Okay, now we're going to get into some nitty gritty in the 8th, 9th, and 10th, and 11th. Maybe there's only 10 questions. I don't know. But anyway, let's see what the another question is like this. It says in the Ohel Moed, right? Look at 21. In the Ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting, outside the partition, michutz leparochet. Parochet is the curtain that separates between where? The Holy of Holies and the rest of the sanctuary. Okay? So at least in the tabernacle you had 2 rooms. In the temple you have 3 rooms, but then you had the courtyard. So we're dealing with 3 areas, as I think I brought down in the picture on the bottom of page 2, the picture of the tabernacle. So you have where the ark is, that's the Holy of Holies, and then you have the sanctuary where you have the rest of the vessels, such as the menorah, the incense offering altar, and the shulchan, where the showbreads are placed. So what does this mean? It says, in the tent of meeting, outside of this curtain. And where's the curtain? The curtain separates al ha'edut. It actually separating the testimony, which for practical purpose we'll understand the testimony is the ark, where the stone tablets were, where the Torah will be kept. Kol mari makom arokzehu nira l'lo tzarech. So anybody who sees this source, anybody that sees this arrangement, sees there's really no reason to even bring it at all, because what it could have said was al ha-menorah ya'arachoto. In other words, we don't need to know where the menorah. Everyone knows the menorah is in that room, so just tell me it's on the menorah that you're going to put the lamps. In other words, what are we discussing here? The fact that it's pointing out and pushing exactly where it's located. It's in the Ohel Moed. It's in the tent, outside of the curtain, which is, the curtain is on the testimony. It's so important to say that. Just say, like the lamps on top of the menorah. We already know later on, at least in Parsha Zemor, where it will be. And the 9th question is, it's only mentioning here 1 candle. Ner Echad, right? That's all that's mentioned, if you look at it. To kindle a lamp, the lamp continually. But in Parsha Zemor, it says to candle the neros. The neros is plural, and we know there are 7. Okay, so as he mentions in Parsha Zemor, it says Yarok es haneros, arrange the candles. And then in the 10th question, it says we're going to compare our verse compared to what it says in chapter 24. Okay. Oh, By the way, if you want to know in terms of where the Aron is placed, you can look in chapter 25, verse 16. And in terms of where the menorah will be placed, is going to be opposite the Shulchan in chapter 26, verse 34 and 35. So that has actually already been said. Not only will it be said again in Parsha Emor, but it was already said. Okay, now we have it in our verse where it says Ohel Moed first. And then afterwards it says outside of the curtain, meaning on the other side of the curtain. But when you look in Parsha Emor, it is reversed. So you can go to chapter 24 in Vayikra, in Leviticus, in the beginning, and you see that the verse it's in opposite order. Hello, it begins with chutz, michutz leparochis, outside of the curtain, Ohel Moed, in the Ohel Moed. What is that all about? Why is there a switch? I know this sounds very picayune, but we're used to this idea. Every letter is in its right place for a very specific reason, and not just for the codes to come out, right? You can always fall back as a default answer, but there is riches to be gained and mined from this. Also, it says michutz leparoches asher al ha'edus. So in our verse, it says outside of the curtain, which is al ha'edus. The curtain is somehow on the testimony, but over there in Parshat Emor in Vayikra 24, in the beginning, it says michutz leparoches ha'edus. The actual curtain is called the testimony. Not that it's a curtain that's on the testimony, but it says michutz leparoches ha'edus. It's outside of the curtain of testimony. The curtain itself is called testimony. Okay, I have now gone through the questions that we are going to try to resolve, and I'm going to tell you that he's going to tell us one concept that's going to answer them all. Can you believe that? V'nira la'yeshev kol zeh mima shekatuv Ramban. He's able to resolve all of what we just spoke about according to what the Ramban had written. Ki ma sha'amar, the fact that it says lahalot ner tamid, that you raise up a single lamp continuously. That is the ner ma'aravi, the most westernly light, the most westernly lamp. Shayu doilek la'olam, it will be constantly lit. Now we all know that our Beit Knesset, our shuls, our synagogues are like a small temple, and in front of the Holy Ark there's a curtain, and beyond that there's usually a light that is always very low voltage, low wattage, but it's constantly lit. As a reminder, now what did I want to ask here? It's doilek le'olam, fine. But which one is the westernly light? In other words, if the menorah is, let's go through this. The rectangular tabernacle and the courtyard, let's assume, is facing east and west. That's for sure the way the temple is going to be. It's east and west. Which way was the menorah facing? Was it also facing east and west? Then it's very easy to say which is the most westernly candle. But in most opinions is it faced north and south. So if that's the case, then you had 3 wicks on each side of the middle wick. The middle wick faced towards the Holy of Holies, west, and the other 3 pointed inward on each side. So the 6 of them pointed to the middle, and the middle pointed towards the Holy of Holies. Keep that in mind. No matter which way we're thinking about it, keep both in mind. But I think it's easier to understand if we're going to have the second scenario in mind, that everything is pointed to the center and the center one is pointed to the west. Even though it's easier to fathom when you talk about the westernly candle if it was facing east-west, so the western one. But now we're going to think a little bit outside the box. Play with me. Hang in there. Okay. So he says, Aval shar haneros, but all the other neros, meaning the other 6, lo hayu tamid, they were not always lit. Ki'im me'erev ad boker, except from evening until morning, as the verse says so clearly. With this proposal, this discussion we're having now, we can actually answer all these doubts that we just mentioned, all the questions that were just mentioned, with the thesis that we're running with. This is going to be the kicker. We're going to base it on this statement. After God commanded Moses to produce the Mishkan and all of its vessels, and right there, previous Parshiot, there's this concept of a curtain. Now Moses saw the plans, but I don't know, it didn't exactly click that there's a curtain there that's going to separate between what the rest of us can see and what the Kohen Gadol is only going to be able to see once a year, and that is the Aron Kodesh. Now Rabbi Breitowitz mentioned 3 times a year during the holidays they pull the curtain aside and everyone can see. But what about the rest of the year? For most of us, the rest of the year, it was not seen. So based on that, the fact that Chilek HaMishkan L'Shlosha Chalakim, that the Mishkan is divided, and at least the temple is divided into 3 areas, so too the Mishkan. You have the Holy of Holies, the Holies, and then the outer courtyard. And regarding all of them, just remember what God said. Make for me a dwelling place, a Mishkan, v'shechanti betocham. I can dwell in them. It doesn't say in it. In them is plural. Now we all know God rests in every one of us, but that's just one concept. What about if he's actually talking about in them? The Mishkan, in each room, that everyone should be able to see that God dwells there. So once you make this partition, and you're not able to see it on a daily basis, because that curtain is there, and in the Holy of Holies you cannot see. And you cannot see the miracle of what is taking place in there, which we'll discuss very shortly, if you can hang in there, guys. So what happens? He says that Va'asuli Mikdash, the fact that it says in verse 25, chapter 25, verse 8, they shall make for me a sanctuary, so I may dwell amongst them, all 3 rooms, all the areas. So va'asuli mikdash v'shechanti betocham v'haya haparoches mavdio bein kodesh lekodesh kodashim. That this curtain is separating between room 1 and room 2, between the holies and the Holy of Holies. V'rotza Moshe shebechol chelech yedava hamoira ala shechina shroi b'Yisrael. Moses really felt this was not good for the Jewish people not to feel the presence of Hashem in outside of the Holy of Holies. Only the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, once a year can go in there. How are we going to know that God is dwelling amongst all areas of this Mishkan? Hine b'kodesh kodashim hayuluchos ha'edus. Inside the Holy Ark were the broken tablets, as well as the full tablets that were not broken. Asher yidnu edus Hashem ne'emana hashchina shruesham, and this was giving faithful testimony that Hashem, that the Shechina of God, that the presence of God rested there. Ki aluchos hayu behem ma'as hanisim. I'm going to try to describe to you that we know that Hashem is the one who carved into these stone tablets. And no matter which side you were on, in other words, if there were a tablet that you could read from one side, it was carved from one of the sides. So when you go around to the other side to try to read it, it should be backwards, right? That would make sense. Like when you're in a car and there's an ambulance behind you. So you look in your rear view mirror and you see the word ambulance correctly, because they actually spell it, if you never noticed, the word ambulance backwards on the front end of the ambulance, so that you would be able to see it correctly in your rear view mirror. So I'm trying to describe to you what it should be if it's inscribed from one end of the stone to the other. When you're on the other end, it should look backwards, but it wasn't backwards. So that's the first miracle I can describe to you, that no matter which side you were on, it was correctly from right to left in Hebrew. And not only that, there are 2 specific letters that have, I'll call them donuts in the middle. That would be a mem, right, a final mem, and a samech. So one is a little bit more square, the other one's a little bit more round, but nevertheless, what you have is a little block that's somehow, and they were levitating. They levitated. They were, otherwise it wouldn't spell the letter correctly. I mean, it's certainly a Sefer Torah would be puzzle if it wasn't the correct letter. So here, these were two open miracles and revealed miracles that would be able to be seen on the luchos. So based on that, let me just continue reading where he says it. Shunikroim mishnei ivreihem, as Rashi mentions in verse 33, verse 32, verse 15, that they were the stone tablets could be read from both sides. The mem and the samech, those two letters, shemaluchos benes hayu oimbim. It was by miracle that they were standing. Now keep this idea: miracles that are continuous. Now that's the way the luchos were, and we're going to relate that very much to the lamp. The most westerly lamp was also, in a sense, kept alight through a miracle. They put in, the Kohen would fix the candles with the exact same amount of oil in each one of the containers. And yet one of them lasted twice as long. Okay, it lasted a full 24 hours. So let's see how the Kli Yakar expresses this. He says, the mem and the samech luchos were standing. Fine. V'tinach, granted. Shekol haba makam mahu. Anybody that would enter that place, yira ayin ba'ayin. They would see with their own eyes. Ki shem Hashem nikro olav. That the name of God is written, is called out on it. Obviously, just as a side point, if you want to go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 10, it's talking about the Jewish people in that sense, that the name of Hashem is called upon them. Now, the fact that this curtain separates, right? Ein kol adam rashai lavo shama. Not every single person is only the Kohen Gadol, right? And even if we said that the curtain was removed 3 times a year, that was just for a few days, right? Pen chalila yomer hamaharer. What do you think Bible critics are going to say? They're going to say, you know what? I know why there's a curtain. So you can't see that they're fooling us. Right? I think the Wizard of Oz, right? Like the Wizard of Oz. If there is a miracle that we're all supposed to be seeing, well, then you give edus, give witness. No. So there's an idea, like I think in the mafia, you know, if you're a state's witness, they have to put you under protection because they all know what happens to witnesses. That's called the Disappearing Witnessing Act. Right? His life was cut short because he decided to be a witness against the mafia guy. Okay, very dangerous. So if you want to lie, just separate, get rid of the witnesses. But no, we're going to bring, and how many witnesses do we need? We know you need 2 witnesses, right? So here we have a second witness. It's the westernmost light. Listen to what he says. If someone wants to lie, get rid of, disappear, distance the witnesses. That's why God found it necessary. Also in the inner room, I should say the sanctuary, which is the outer room, also a constant miracle with this most westernly light. So everyone can see it. Even if you're not in that room, you could be in the 3rd chamber, meaning the courtyard, or right where you could see directly through. As we know, there was a way. Remember, the red heifer has to be slaughtered outside the Temple Mount, on or above Mount of Olives, and the Mishnah tells us that he has to be able to see directly into the Holy of Holies. So we know there's a way. So anybody passing by could see it. They could see that westernly light being still continuously being lit. So it was for everyone to see. And that was a miracle. So I asked a great question, and that is, why do you have the curtain to begin with? What purpose does it serve? So we discussed this idea previously that Perhaps because the Kohen Gadol goes in there only one time a year, and it's a heavy meditation. He has to have all the right kavanot and right intentions, and he's not allowed to go there just any day. So to have a curtain, it's like a fence. It's kind of a reminder. There's a limit. You can't go in there, and when you do go in there, it's a very private, intimate time. You're begging for forgiveness for the Jewish people. Not every Kohen came out. There was many Kohen high priests in history that, when the Sadducees were in charge, because they paid their way in, they weren't righteous. I think every year there was a new one. They died inside, and they they go in there with a cord wrapped around them so that they could be yanked out, so to speak. Yeah. So just to refresh this idea about during the Second Temple period, the people who did not believe in the oral Torah, they were called the Sadducees. The Pharisees they're us, we're them. They believed in the oral Torah as well as the written Torah. And the Sadducees were the corrupt clan who was running the temple. Okay, they actually ran the sacrifices. They bought their way in. In other words, they paid their way in to be, I think also by the Romans. It wasn't just they were paying off Jews. They were actually working with the Roman government to have power. And that was not a good time for the Jews during that time. Okay, so let's go back to the text. And basically the idea is that we mentioned that it seemed necessary by Hashem to make also in the sanctuary, meaning the holies, not the Holy of Holies, also this continuous light of the western light, in order that everyone who's passing by should see it. Now, I want you to go to Isaiah chapter 59, verse 19. Now, there's a hint to this idea. From the west, people will fear the name of Hashem, and from the rising sun, S-U-N, His glory. Okay, so this idea in chapter 59 is alluding to, from the west, the westernly light, that people will have an awe and a knowledge and an intimate knowledge of Hashem, of the name of Hashem. Okay? Ki hu shochen b'tocham, that He's dwelling in them. That's the whole idea. He's dwelling among them and with them. The people would know it. V'ilu lo haya haparoches. Now, if you didn't have this curtain that was mechuse al aron ha'edus, that actually separated the Holy Ark of Testimony, lo yatzorach nezeh, you wouldn't have a need. And Moses felt that it was necessary, so obviously had this discussion with Hashem. Ulahatzah zu nomar, according to this approach, shekol parsha zu, this entire paragraph that we're dealing with, ein hakavana letzavot al haneros hamenorah. It's not coming to tell us about the lights, all the 7 lights on the menorah. Ki'im b'parshas Emor, but rather in Parshas Emor, Vayikra 24, Sham ikra makomo shel tzivoy zeh. That's the real place for this command. And what about here? Kan ikra tzivoy al ner maravi zeh. This is the point. It's only really speaking about the command regarding that most westernly light. That's the focus. Let's call it the hyper-focus. To do what? Legalot Moshe, in order to reveal to Moses, because Moses had this feeling there was something necessary. God responded knowingly to reveal to Moses, Ki afa pisha haparoches muchase al aron ha'edus, that even though this veil, this parochus, is going to cover that holy ark of testimony, Nakom Yegam B'makom hakodesh nes tamid. Nevertheless, there will also be in the place of the holies, meaning the outer room, also a constant miracle. And why? Hamafarsem ki Hashem shochen shama. In order to publicize. It's so important to publicize that God dwells there as well. As He said, make me a mikdash so I can dwell in them, in every area of the temple area. Ukavar Yadata, and you already know, where is Moses buried? Moses buried on the other side of the Jordan, in the area of God. So what did Moses say when he was giving the blessing to them? V'yar reishi shlo. Look in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 21. It says, he chose the first portion for himself. Yes, there's the idea of the 2.5 tribes. They wanted that portion. There's no doubt about it. But why did they choose that? Why did they choose that? For that is where the lawgiver's plot is hidden. They wanted a certain chelek. They wanted to be connected to Moses. He came at the head of the nation, carrying out Hashem's justice for his ordinances with Israel. So this is the idea in Hebrew when we say V'yar reishi shlo. He saw the first portion for himself. Ki hu haya reishit. We're talking about Moses now, the personality of Moses. He was the first. I know in the new Christian Bibles it says something about J.C. Penney being the Alpha and the Omega, the first and last. Before the world was created, he was. I mean, come on, put that aside. It's comic book stuff. This is the real stuff. He was the first and the inception of all things that hang in miracles. In other words, let me try to describe. All power comes from Hashem, but Hashem bestowed certain gifts and properties to Moses, and it's from Moses that then that will filter out and be distributed. We're talking about prophecy. It says in the Torah, he is the greatest prophet. There's no prophet that can be greater than him. Right? So his prophecy is the first in this sense, and all the other prophets are going to basically receive the light, as we're going to describe it in those terms, with the westernly light. Which way with the western light was closest and directed towards the Holy of Holies. So, God forbid, that light is not God. We're talking about the light of Moses. And what do we know about Moses when he was born? The whole house filled with light. Oh, we'll get to it shortly. Okay? But it's through his light, not that Moses was God. There is an idea that yes, to a certain extent, he was a man of God, and he had such heavenly aspirations and he was so refined that he was like half man, half God, right? But that doesn't make him God. Okay, so he was very, very high spiritually, and that's what we're going to focus on here. Now, we're at the verse where it says, we already know that Moses, peace upon him, said these words in Deuteronomy 33:21, because he was the first and the inception of all things that stand miraculously, all matters that exist miraculously. Now, he is like that westernly candle. He is like that westernly candle. The words are, Hu haya kaner zeh. He was like this candle. Shemadlik mimenu kama neros, v'haner eno chaser. What is it about a candle? Imagine this. You take another candle to light from a candle. You now passed on what we'll call energy. I don't know what the exact thing is that we'll call the light that's lit on the wick. But when you look at the original light that you took it from, nothing's missing. It's exactly the same candlelight power, right? Let's just say whatever it is. I have no idea how to make up numbers here, but let's just say it's like 5 candlelight power. Is it whatever? I guess it's 1. Let's say 1. Let's use 1. 1 candlelight power. And you take another candle and light from it. So what would you think? It's half candlelight power? But that's the miracle, right? It's not. That power is still 100% 1 candlelight power. So this is how it works. So too, ha'etzo mimenu shefa ruach hakodesh. Listen to this. Everything that emanated from Moses, that was a shefa ruach hakodesh, that flowed with what we call ruach hakodesh, the divine spirit. Akol hanavim shebo acharav. It was a flow from Moses. Of course, it originally emanated with Hashem and was a gift to Moses, and it's through Moses and that's why when we look in Nach, right? I have right here. Anything you'll find in the later, whatever you call 4/5 of this book, anything that you see that looks new, It's not. There can't be. There's already a rule that a prophet cannot come up with anything new. It has to be hinted at. It has to be in the 5 books. Now, it might, like I said, hinted to, but it's got to be clearly hinted to. Not like fabricated, right? Not in your wildest dreams and nightmares that it's there. It's got to be there. Okay? So there's nothing new. The prophets never mention anything new. It's an extension of this. Clear as mud? Okay. Ki penei Moshe kachama. The face of Moses was like the sun. When we think about the sun versus the moon, the sun is the source of light. We say Moses' face was like the sun. Joshua's face was like the moon. That means you're a receiver. The light's not emanating from, and we do see light, but it's reflective light. The original light is from the sun. So in terms of prophecy, we're using Moses as the example. The sun, S-U-N, and the moon, Joshua, all the other prophets. Ki mimeno ha'etzal ur al kulam, because it was from him that emanated the light to all of them. So too the same exact thing with the ner ma'aravi zeh. The truth is, the way the Kliyakar says, that the light emanating from this candle that was lit for 24 hours at a time, that source of light emanated from Moses himself. Sha'uro masmid b'derek nes, that its light was a continuous miracle. Etzel olav me'uro shel Moshe, ki hu haya emtza'i bein ur Hashem lekol minei uro shel amdu b'nes. That the emanation that shone upon it, or actually even Moses' light emanated upon it, because Moses was the emtza'i. Moses acted as an intermediary between the light of God and all other lights that exist miraculously. Okay, so that's why these 2 verses are spoken about here, right? And we're saying you. Okay, we're going to get into all this. And this is a siman, the sign as a proof to what we're talking about is, look in Exodus chapter 2 verse 2. It says, Shebeledato nitmale kol habayis oro. When Moses was born, his whole house was full of light. Okay, you can look in Rashi on that. So we're talking about that his mother saw that it was good, right? How do we know what's good mean? Good. God, when he created the world, he said, he created light, and he said it was good. So we know that light is good. That Moses was, when he was born, his mother said, like what does that mean? Every mother's going to say, it's good. The pain has ceased. The kid looks beautiful, and all that, blood, just wipe it off. But there's this objective good, and that was the light that came when Moses was born. Lahoros, to teach us what? Shehu yihiyeh hamekabel rishon min ura elyon. This is like amazing. Moses was the first recipient from the divine light. Ube'emtzu'uto chushva ha'or, and it's through his agency, his acting as an intermediary, emanates and flows this light al kol makom, on every place, sheyesh bo davar ha'oimed b'nes, on all other lights that stand in a miracle, which we're referring to as the Western light here. And now we understand why it says the ata tetzaveh, that double language of you shall command. Shtei nochios. Why the first, the ata and you, hainu atzmutcha, right? That is the essence of your being, and you are tosefet ura shebecha. Remember, there's this abundant extra light that's within you, Moses. So that's where that's you, the light that you have. Tetzaveh es b'nei Israel. You will command the Jewish people, the yichla lecha, to take for you light, oil. Listen to these words. Why do they have to bring it only to Moses? Let them bring it to the Kohen. Command the children of Israel, they should take for you the oil. Look what it says. In verse 20. Now you should command the children of Israel, they should take for you also. Okay? That's alecha. That this shemen should be brought specifically to you. He's the light, he's the fuel. Meaning to say, letzarfo alecha, to become totally combined and intertwined with you and who you are. Kedei shetashbiya olav mehodecha, in order that you will have an effect on the world from your glory and your splendor. Kedei la'alos ner tamid, in order to raise up this candle, singular, in a continuous fashion. This is the most westernly candle, Zener Maravi, Shia Tamidi B'derech Nes, that was constantly aflame in a supernatural way. And then afterwards, the Akarkach Natan Tam Lishvach. He wants to give a great reason, a good reason. Lama Hayatzarek B'nesa. Why do we need this miracle? The Fishu B'Ohel Moed, remember we mentioned the order. It's in the Ohel Moed, it's in the tent of meeting, Michutz LaParochet, outside of the partition, Asher Al Ha'edus, which is on the testimony. Why? Because the Paroches is Mavdil Bein Makom Sheyesh Edus Al HaShechina, Sheroi B'Yisrael, Ubein Stam Ohel Moed. This partition, this veil, is separating between the place where there is the testimony about the Shekhinah resting with Israel, and then outside in the main sanctuary. Therefore, Yaroch Oto Aaron me'erev ad boker. So, did Aaron, we asked the question, right, but it says a statement, Aaron shall arrange it from evening until morning. But the question we asked, what are you saying? He actually stood there all night and arranged them? You know what he did? He placed in each one of the cups the exact amount of oil. Similar. There was nothing unusual about this one that lit longer. It was the exact amount of oil as all the rest. She'ein bo ki'im shi'ur deleka me'erev ad boker. It was exactly the amount they needed to use to make it stay lit from sundown to sunrise. Nevertheless, that one westerly candle stayed lit. It kept burning. However, at this point we didn't mention that it was the westerly candle. Okay, the text doesn't. So you still wouldn't know, but the fact that we told you. So it doesn't explain it. Now when it says Lifnei Hashem, look again. Right? Where does it say it? Now you should command the children outside before Hashem. See in verse 21, verse 21, it says Lifnei Hashem as a chukos olam, as an eternal decree for their generations. So only when it says in front of God, Lifnei Hashem, it's in front of God in our Parsha, right? So it's in front of God. That's the Ner that's most westernly, that's closest to the Shekhinah that's in the west. The divine presence is in the west. Ki mitzad ha'edus, it's from the aspect of giving testimony as witnesses that it's similar. We're comparing this one candle to the ark. So what is one witness to the ark? It makes two. And as we know in Deuteronomy chapter 19 verse 15, it says, but according to 2 or 3 witnesses shall the matter be confirmed. Okay, so we know you need two. Shneim Hayidei Moshe. Both. I'm putting up 2 big fingers. Both. What do we call the Torah? It's called Moses' Torah. The Torah shall Moshe. Here's a few verses if you want to look them up on your spare time. In the prophet of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 22. In Joshua, chapter 8, verse 31. In 1 Kings, chapter 2, verse 3. The Torah is called the Torah of Moses. So the Torah, which is inside the ark, and everything the ark represents, that's of Moses. And here, this most western light is also testimony in the same way as the ark is. And it's also attributed to Moses, as we already mentioned, that the oil is to you. It's, they shall take for you. What would you think you're talking about? For God, for the menorah? It's for Moses. The oil is for Moses. Kigama Torah nikra al shemo. That both of them are through Moses, also the Torah is through Moses, and it's not mentioned here. We're not mentioning all the candles. We're only mentioning one candle, and one candle only. Only in Parshas Emor, in Vayikra 24, do you realize there are 6 additional candles. Ki ein kan makom, because this is not the place. Only in Parshas Emor, as like it says over there, right in chapter 24, verse 4. Al ha-menorah ha-tahora, on the pure menorah, yarok et haneros, arrange the candles, plural. Therefore, only here it says, Ata Tetzaveh. Remember over there it says, Tetzaveh b'nei Israel. He's now going to go into what's the difference. He says, why does it say over here, the Ata Tetzaveh, the double language of you, since the main place for the candles is over there? But the Ikar Atzivoy Sham, Haya al kol haneros. The prime place for the command is over there. The agav grora zachar sham gam ner maravizeh, and it's just it was incidentally dragged on. If you look over in Vayikra, look to the verses, it also mentions one candle as well, but that was only because of the ner ma'aravi. Now, la'alos ner tamid michutz laparocha sa'edu be'oel moed yarok oto. We're now going to discuss the difference in our verses over there, the change up in the order. And he's going to tell us it's not so simple. So he says like this, seems to me, veneerally, that this Seder, the actual order of the verse dealing in Parshas Emor that we just read, you need to make a pause, like a comma, a stop, between the word la parochet and the word edus, which would sound like this if I read it. To raise up that ner tamid, that one candle, that is outside of the parochas, outside of the curtain, as testimony, comma, as testimony. Not the parochas of testimony. What kind of thing? That curtain is a testimony? We know the ark is a testimony. We know that the whole Ohel Moed is a testimony, but how's the curtain? It's not. That's not how to read it. Read it again. In verse chapter 24, verse 2 and 3, right? Mentioning that you braise up that single candle constantly, continuously, outside of the curtain, comma, as testimony. In the Ohel Moed you shall arrange it. Okay, so let's go through the way he reads it. Lalos ner tamid michutz laparochet, meaning that Hashem actually wanted that there would be one candle constantly in a miraculous way outside, on the other side of that curtain. And then afterwards, Peiresh Mishamesh Nezeh, and only afterwards explaining what the use of this miracle is. The miracle would be that the Edus Ba'oah Moed, that the actual temple and the tabernacle itself will serve as a testimony. How does the whole tabernacle serve as a testimony? What's a testimony to? That Hashem dwells there. That's why you don't only have it in the Holy of Holies, in the innermost room, but also in the outer room. Another miracle acting as a testimony. That this miracle will grant or give God's trustworthy testimony also in the Ohel Moed as a whole. And anybody who looks at it, kol mistachlim sham, anybody's able to pierce through and look, v'yiru miner maravi zeh, et shem Hashem b'kirbam hu. They're able to recognize from that most westernly light that Hashem is there and dwelling amongst them. Ki yarok oto Aaron, as we said, that Aaron will arrange them from night until morning, and then it will be Lifnei Hashem Tamid, in front of Hashem continuously. Now, according to this, We have in chapter 24, verse 2 in Vayikra, in Leviticus, Tzaves b'nei Israel, v'yichu alecha, and they shall take for you. Now what he's going to describe is this, that there is something specifically for Moshe. Again, that's why we have the Atat Tetzaveh in our portion, whereas over there, he's commanding the children of Israel. So there's something that is for everybody, and then there's something that's unique just by him in terms of whatever we're about to discuss. Let's see. Buckle up. Now, according to what it says over there in Vayikra 24, verse 2, command the children of Israel, they shall take for you the oil. So we hear from this that there is Sheyesh kan davar hamayuchas l'kol b'nei Israel. There's something that relates to, as a message to all of Israel. V'yesh ba davar hamayuchas al Moshe levad. And there's a message there just for Moses. Hu hadavar ha'oimed b'neis. I skipped something. I skipped the whole line. Behold, it says Elecha, for you specifically. Al kain husrak lefarshnan. Therefore, we're going to have to discuss both. The thing that relates to you, Moses, but not to them, is hadavar ha'oimed b'neis. Anything that is able to stand in a constant motion of a miracle, asher olav. And regarding that, that's why it says lalos ner tamid, about Moses, to bring up that one light continuously until when? Chukas olam l'dorotechem, as a everlasting statue for all your generations. This is still talking about Moses. His spirit will continue on. The achachach perish, and afterwards is explaining hadavram yuchas l'kol Yisrael, something that relate to all the Jewish people, and that's what it means in Vayikra when it says Al menorah haTorah, on the pure menorah, Yarach es haneros. You arrange the plural, the many candles, Lifnei Hashem tamid, in front of Hashem always. Ki kol haneros hayupoini mu ner maravi, because all of the wicks, they all pointed to that middle candle that was pointing west. They're all facing, they're all looking for, they're all anticipating, they're all learning from. Moses, our teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu is our teacher. Al kain nemar b'kulam. That's why it says regarding all 7 candles, Lifnei Hashem tamid, in that verse. It's really, they're all in front of Hashem, and he claims this is a perush zeyakar, as he usually ends. However, there are 2 additional paragraphs that I don't believe that I covered in the past, and I want to get to them now. So alternatively, davar acher, lachach nakat mare makom zeh, that this was designated. In other words, this discussion is taking place now. Why? Michus leparoches asher al ha'edus. We're saying it's outside of the curtain, the partition, which is on the Ark of Testimony. So people should not make a mistake. This goes against people who will easily make mistakes, right? We've all made mistakes in our lives. Now we're on the true path of wisdom. But there are people who are walking around this earth blind. So there are people that will make a mistake and think that God needs the light. Why do you have the menorah? It must be because God needs the light. But guess what? You asked earlier, another reason could be you actually have the curtain, you have the Holy Ark where the Shekhinah rests. There's no light there, and there's a curtain. So it shows, the curtain is showing you that God does not need the light. Actually, inside the place where the testimony is, it's completely light. Now, I don't mean maybe physically light, but we're talking about God's presence. It's completely light. And this is why it says by Moses, they should take the oil for you, for your needs, but not for Hashem's. Right? As the Medrash mentions, we discussed this before. If you ever go to the old city, in the walls that are outside the old city, so the wall, they're you're sitting in a window and it goes like this. Why? You can easily say the archers, right? When you're sitting there, you want to be protected. So that works well when you're outside, right? What about in a normal home? That's exactly how it should be in a normal home. You also want to draw the light in. So it's narrow on the outside and it comes and it makes wide so that the light is drawn in and is brought into the room as much as possible. But in the base of Mikdash, it was the opposite. It was small on the inside and protruded outside because it didn't need the sunlight. It didn't need the light from the outside. In fact, the light of the temple, that energized the sun. S-U-N. Okay? As we'll see shortly. So the windows in the temple were wide on the outside, but narrow on the inside. To teach you what? That it was not the sun, S-U-N, that illuminated the temple. Ela Adarabu is the other way. It's actually the temple that illuminated the world, as it says in Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 2. It's really the last few words, but I'll read the whole thing. Behold, the glory of God of Israel was coming from the east. Its sound was like the sound of multitude of waters, and the earth shone with God's glory, with His glory. The earth shines with God's glory. It's whatever light is emanating from the sun, it's emanating from Hashem. And not only there, we also explained the Parsha's V'yetzeh. That would be in Genesis chapter 28, verse 11, where Yaakov encountered that place and he thought that the sun set early. Perhaps it did. But he saw that the sun dimmed. Because when he comes across that place which is so bright, of course the light is going to dim. Meaning you don't need the heavenly orbits of the sun, but rather it was the light that it was emanating from the place. So when you go to Genesis 28 verse 11, it says, V'yitka b'makom v'yalon sham ki bo hashemesh. Right, he encountered the place, he slept there because the sun had set. Or at least he thought it had. Maybe now we understand when it says to you, right, the Moses, this is going to be for you, this oil. Ki afilu pnei Moshe, even the face of Moses, you kanfei chama, k'pnei chama. His face was like what do we say? The face of the sun, like the countenance of the sun. His face shone. Nevertheless, you Moses, you Moses need this spiritual light. It's not the sun that's illuminating the Mikdash. You need this light as well. Ela HaMikdash, meaning you need the light of the Mikdash. Ela Mikdash Mer Shemesh, but it's the Mikdash that is illuminating the sun. Ki mimeno yotzei hashefa el kol tzva maron. Because from it, from God's presence, from the Mikdash goes forth all providence that's able to light and flows towards all the heavenly hosts. When you see stars, right, even the constellations, it's all emanating from one place, Hashem Yisbarach, all coming from Hashem, and using the Mikdash as an example, that the light emanating from the Mikdash is where all energy flows from. Now there's some that explain, Yesh B'Parsha Zu, there's a way to explain our Parsha also as Musar Elatoim, giving rebuke to people who need it, about ethical ideas. You know what? They give their choicest portion for themselves, right? In other words, they allow their chelek hamuvchar from their own money for their own physical needs. They take the best, and they eat, and they drink, and any kind of, they'll take their whole family for Passover for $50,000 to the Swiss Alps or who knows where. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You know how many people they could help by making Pesach at home? Unbelievable. Anyway, so this is a problem. He's going to give them hell for using, okay, if you're using it for mitzvah, great. But because people go overboard sometimes. V'kol ha'malacha v'nimza v'names. all their work and all their efforts are just inferior and wretched. But rather we should understand, Ner Elokim Nishmas Adam, the candle of God is actually the soul of man. Now, what about Cain? Cain and Abel. What's the problem? Cain, it might have been his idea first, but he gave the flaxseed, the inferior, the worst of the worst. And what did Abel give? He was the shepherd. He gave the best of the sheep. He gave the wool. Okay, we're not going to get into shadness right now, but there's a whole opening for a whole nother conversation. But he gave the best, and it was acceptable. So when you give the worst, what is it? So when you squeeze the oil, the very first drops of oil, that goes to the menorah. The second and third, whatever the rest of the oil, that's going to be used for the menachos, for the flour and bread offerings, okay, the crackers, the matzah, the oil. So let's go into what he says. Kederk shasa kayin, right? If the flame of God is the soul of man, then when you come to use your wealth, use your best of your wealth for the first drops for your soul, not for your physical well-being. Listen to what he says. Don't do like Cain, but rather like Abel. Shehevi mincha Hashem, when he brought his offering to Hashem, it was min bekorat sono michalvehen. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 4, he brought from the best. Literally, he brought from the first of his flock and the choicest. Kach yitein rishon lemaor. This is how, when you were talking about the first drop of oil for the lamp, it was l'tzorach ner elokim nishmas adam. Think of it like this: it's for your soul. Your soul is the soul of God. The lamp of God is the soul of man. Asher uro nitzchi. It's an eternal light. Feed your eternal self with the best. Like it says, lahalos ner tamid. Keep the flame going constantly. V'hasheni yitel menachos. It's only the second drops. Leave that for the physical stuff. Shumaycha l'kohanim. That ends up being food for the high priest. V'dai remez b'zeh l'mevinim. This is good enough for those who truly understand what I'm trying to say. So maybe next year when we read this again, we'll even understand it much more. So that was just the beginning. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and we should all just take the lessons that we have from our holy sage, the Kliyakar.
It's